called me the dumb son, the failure, the disappointment who'd never amount to anything. My father got fired, and they blamed me for bringing shame to the family name. My brother was the golden child, the one with the real future. They disowned me, erased me from family photos, told everyone I didn't exist anymore. But here's what they didn't know. While they were busy writing me off, I was building an empire. Cut. And when I walked into that boardroom years later, my father's former company on the verge of collapse, they finally understood what they'd thrown away. I'm John, and this is the story of how being called the dumb son became my greatest motivation. My name is John, and for 23 years, I believed I was stupid. Not just average, not just less talented than my brother, actually stupid. That's what my family told me, day after day, year after year, until it became the truth I lived with. Crude. My father would look at me across the dinner table with this expression of profound disappointment, like he couldn't believe his DNA had produced something so defective. My mother would sigh whenever I spoke, as if the sound of my voice physically pained her, and my brother Marcus. He didn't even try to hide his contempt. We grew up in a nice suburban neighborhood outside of Boston. My father worked as a senior executive at a prestigious manufacturing company called Thornfield Industries. My mother was a part-time consultant who spent most of her energy organizing charity events and maintaining our family's social standing. Everything in our house revolved around appearances, achievements, and Marcus. Marcus was 3 years older than me, and from the moment I became aware of the world, I understood that he was the sun and I was barely a distant, cold planet. He excelled at everything. Top of his class, captain of the debate team, varsity soccer, early admission to Harvard. My parents framed his certificates, displayed his trophies, talked about his accomplishments to anyone who would listen. When people asked about me, my mother would say, "Oh, John is still finding his way," with a tight smile that communicated everything she wouldn't say out loud. I wasn't a bad student, but I wasn't exceptional either. I pulled B's and occasional C, yes, struggled with traditional classroom learning. And my teachers would write things like distracted and doesn't apply himself on my report cards. What nobody understood, what nobody bothered to investigate, was that I learned differently. I was a visual hands-on learner, trapped in a system designed for people who could memorize and regurgitate information. But my parents never looked deeper than the grades. To them, the numbers told the whole story. And that story was failure. The comparisons were constant and cruel. Why can't you be more like Marcus? Became my father's favorite question. It wasn't really a question, though. It was an accusation, a reminder, a judgment. Every dinner conversation somehow circled back to Marcus's achievements and my shortcomings. If Marcus got an A, my B- was pathetic. If Marcus won an award, my participation was laughable. Cool. If Marcus had a girlfriend from a good family, my awkward social life was embarrassing. I tried. God knows I tried. I stayed up late studying, hired tutors with money I earned from a part-time job at a hardware store, attempted to mold myself into whatever they wanted me to be, but nothing was ever enough. The harder I tried, the more I seemed to fail in their eyes, and the more their disappointment grew into something uglier. The real breaking point came during my senior year of high school. I had applied to several state universities, knowing that Harvard or Yale were never going to happen for me. I wasn't delusional about my academic standing. I got accepted to a decent state school with a strong business program, and I was actually proud of myself. It wasn't Harvard, but it was mine. I had earned it. I announced it at dinner one night, probably hoping for once to see something other than disappointment in my parents' eyes. My father looked up from his plate, glanced at my mother, and said, "Business school at State. That's where people go when they can't get in anywhere else. Marcus is at Harvard studying economics. What exactly do you think you're going to do with a degree from State?" Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. Cocked. I felt something crack inside me that night. Not break completely, just crack, like a windshield that's been hit by a rock, still functional, but fundamentally damaged. Spiderwebbing outward from the point of impact, I finished dinner in silence, went to my room, and made a decision. I would go to that state school. I would study business, and I would prove them all wrong, even if it took me the rest of my life. College was the first time I felt like I could breathe, away from the constant comparisons, away from my father's disappointed stares and my mother's theatrical sighs. I discovered something shocking. I wasn't stupid. In fact, when I was learning about things that interested me, applying knowledge to real-world problems, working with my hands and seeing tangible results, I was actually pretty smart. I threw myself into my business classes, but more importantly, I started buying broken electronics at thrift stores and fixing them. I taught myself how to repair computers, smartphones, small appliances. I'd buy something non-functional for $5, invest $10 in parts, and sell it for $50. It started as a hobby, a way to make extra money, but it became something more. It became proof that my brain worked, just differently than Marcus's brain, differently than the standardized tests and traditional classrooms measured. By my sophomore year, I had a small operation running. Card partnered with several thrift stores who would call me when they received electronics. I had a network of buyers who trusted me. I was making more money than most college students, and I was learning real business skills: negotiation, quality control, customer service, inventory management, profit margins. This wasn't theoretical knowledge from a textbook. This was the real thing. I didn't tell my family about any of it. The few times I went home for holidays, they barely asked about school. Conversations centered entirely on Marcus's accomplishments at Harvard, his internships at prestigious firms, his networking with the sons and daughters of important people. I would sit there, invisible, and wonder why I even bothered coming home. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was my junior year, early November, cold and gray. My mother called, which was unusual because she typically only reached out for obligatory birthday wishes or holiday logistics. Her voice was strained, angry, and she didn't bother with pleasantries. "Your father was fired today," she said, each word dropping like a stone. "And it's your fault." I was confused, genuinely lost. What? How is it my fault? I haven't even talked to Dad in months. What happened? He was fired because of the embarrassment you've caused this family. Everyone knows his youngest son is a failure, working at some junk shop, barely scraping through state school. It reflects poorly on him, on his judgment, on his family values. The company is making changes, and they decided they didn't want someone whose own son can't even succeed. You've humiliated us for the last time. The accusation was so absurd, so disconnected from reality, that I almost laughed. But there was real venom in her voice, real conviction. She actually believed this. They actually believed that I, the son they'd ignored and belittled for decades, had somehow caused my father's professional problems. "Mom, that doesn't make any sense. Companies don't fire senior executives because their adult son goes to state school. What really happened? Don't you dare question me." Her voice rose to a shrill pitch. "You've been a burden since the day you were born. Marcus had to work twice as hard to make up for your failures, spent thousands of dollars trying to fix you, trying to help you be normal, and this is how you repay us. By dragging your father down with you." Something inside me, that crack from senior year dinner, finally broke completely. Not with a dramatic shattering, but with a quiet, definitive snap. Like a rope that's been fraying for years, finally giving way. "I'm done," I said quietly. "I'm done pretending that any of this is normal or acceptable. I'm done carrying blame for things that aren't my fault. If Dad was fired, it's because of something he did or didn't do, not because of me. And if you all want to keep pretending I'm the problem in this family, fine, but I'm out. You're out. You were never really in. John, you've never been one of us. Marcus is our real son, our legacy. You're just the mistake we've had to live with." Don't forget to subscribe. Hit that like button and comment on this video. I hung up. My hands were shaking, not with anger exactly, but with something else. Relief, maybe, clarity. For the first time in my life, the constant noise of their disapproval had stopped. Not because they'd finally approved, but because I'd stopped listening. Over the next few weeks, I learned the real story through a family friend who felt sorry for me. My father hadn't been fired because of me or family embarrassment. He'd been let go because Thornfield Industries was restructuring after several quarters of declining profits. They were cutting costs, eliminating redundant executive positions, and my father, despite his years of service, had made some poor strategic decisions that contributed to the company's problems. He'd backed several product lines that failed, alienated key clients with his arrogance, and resisted modernization efforts that might have saved the company money. Crescent. It had nothing to do with me and everything to do with his own professional failings. But admitting that would have required my father to accept responsibility, and that wasn't something he was capable of. It was easier to blame the disappointing son, the family embarrassment, the convenient scapegoat who'd been absorbing their projected failures for years. I didn't hear from any of them after that call. Not a birthday call, not a Christmas card, nothing. It was like I'd been erased. I later found out through social media that they'd actually removed me from family photos in their house, cropping me out or replacing frames with pictures that only showed the three of them: Marcus, the golden child, Mom, the social climber, and Dad, the fallen executive, playing happy family without the defective fourth member. It hurt. I'd be lying if I said it didn't. But it also freed me in a way I hadn't expected. Without their constant disapproval weighing me down, without the endless comparisons and criticisms, I could finally focus entirely on building something of my own. I graduated from state school with honors in business, which probably would have shocked my family if they'd been paying attention. My electronics repair hobby had evolved into something bigger. I'd started partnering with small businesses to help them manage their technology assets more efficiently. Companies were constantly upgrading their equipment, throwing away old but functional devices, wasting money on unnecessary replacements. I created a consulting service that would assess their actual needs, repair and refurbish existing equipment when possible, source cost-effective alternatives when necessary, and help them maximize the lifespan of their technology investments. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a Silicon Valley startup story, but it was real, it was profitable, and it was mine. Called the company Resto Tech Solutions, and I ran it out of a small rented office with 2 employees myself and a brilliant technician I'd met through mutual contacts. The first few years were hard. I worked 70-hour weeks, took every client I could get, learned from every mistake, reinvested every dollar of profit back into the business. I lived in a cramped apartment with 3 roommates, drove a used car that barely ran, and ate ramen more nights than I'd like to admit. But slowly, steadily, Restotech grew. We started landing bigger clients. A chain of dental offices hired us to manage their equipment across 15 locations. A manufacturing company brought us on to handle their facilities' technology infrastructure. A school district contracted us to refurbish and manage their computer labs. Each success led to referrals. Each satisfied client brought to more, and our reputation grew. By the time I turned 30, Restotech had 40 employees' offices in 3 cities, and annual revenue in the millions. We'd expanded beyond electronics into full-scale business efficiency consulting, helping companies reduce waste, optimize operations, and maximize resources. The kid who was too dumb for Harvard had built something sustainable and successful, and I'd done it without my family's money, connections, or approval. I got married to Sarah, an environmental engineer I'd met at a client site. We bought a house in a nice neighborhood. We had a daughter named Emma who I made damn sure knew she was smart, capable, and loved unconditionally. I built a life that my younger self would have been proud of, and I did it all while my family pretended I didn't exist. I didn't reach out to them, and they didn't reach out to me. Kindly heard updates through mutual acquaintances or saw things on social media before I blocked them all. Marcus had a successful career in finance, got married to someone from a wealthy family, bought a house in the same neighborhood where we grew up. My father struggled to find equivalent work after Thornfield, eventually taking a position at a much smaller company for significantly less money. My mother continued her charity work and social climbing, though with less success now that her husband's professional star had fallen. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. I didn't take pleasure in my father's professional struggles. I'm not that petty, And honestly, I was too busy building my own life to spend much time thinking about theirs. They'd made their choice to erase me, and I'd made my peace with it. Or so I thought. Then came the day, 8 years after my mother's phone call, when everything came full circle in the most unexpected way. I was in my office reviewing a proposal for a major potential client, when my business partner Craig walked in with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're not going to believe this opportunity," he said, sitting down across from me. "Thornfield Industries just reached out. They're in serious trouble, looking for a complete operational overhaul. Technology, infrastructure upgrade, efficiency consulting, the works. It's exactly the kind of project we specialize in, and the contract would be worth more than any 3 of our current clients combined." The name hit me like a physical blow. Thornfield Industries. My father's old company, the place that had fired him and somehow become part of the family mythology about my failures. I hadn't thought about that company in years. But suddenly, I was transported back to childhood, listening to my father talk about his important work, watching my mother light up when she could name-drop his employer at social events. "Tell me more," I said carefully, keeping my voice neutral. Craig pulled out a folder with preliminary information. Thornfield was in bad shape. After my father's departure, things had gotten worse, not better. They'd gone through 3 CEOs in 6 years. Closed major clients, failed to innovate, hemorrhaged money on inefficient operations and outdated technology. They were on the verge of bankruptcy, and the current board was desperately looking for someone who could turn things around without the massive price tag of the big consulting firms. They specifically mentioned that they've heard about our work with struggling mid-sized companies, Craig continued. "Our reputation for coming in under budget while delivering real results could put us on the map in a whole new way. But it's going to require both of us on site for at least a year, maybe more. It's a massive commitment." I should have felt hesitation. I should have felt the old wounds reopening. Instead, I felt something else, entirely curiosity. Not revenge, not exactly. Just a deep curiosity about what had become of the place that had once been so important to my family's identity. The place whose name had been spoken with such reverence in our house. "Clit up a meeting," I told Craig. "Let's hear what they have to say." 3 weeks later, I walked into the Thornfield Industries headquarters for the first time in my life. My father had never brought us to his office when we were kids. He'd kept his professional life separate from his family, probably because he couldn't stand the idea of his colleagues meeting his disappointing son. The building was dated, the lobby shabby, in a way that spoke of deferred maintenance and declining fortunes. The receptionist who greeted us looked tired, stressed. There was an atmosphere of desperation in the air. That particular tension that exists in failing companies where everyone knows the ship is sinking, but nobody knows how to stop it. We were ushered into a conference room where 5 board members were waiting, along with the current CEO, a woman in her 50s named Patricia Henderson, who looked like she hadn't slept well in months. They made their pitch, and it was even worse than Craig had described. The company was bleeding money, losing clients, trapped in outdated processes with an infrastructure that barely functioned. They needed someone to come in, assess everything, and implement real solutions fast. "Why us?" I asked, genuinely curious. "There are bigger consulting firms, companies with more name recognition." Patricia leaned forward, and I saw something in her eyes, desperation mixed with hope. "Because everyone else wants to charge us $2 million to tell us what we already know. We're dying. We need someone who can actually fix things without bankrupting us in the process. Your company has a reputation for delivering results efficiently. Plus, you understand manufacturing. You understand business operations. And frankly, we're out of options." One of the board members, an older man with gray hair and expensive suit, cleared his throat. "Court, we've also done our research on you. Mr. Patterson, you've built Restotech from nothing into a successful multi-million-dollar operation. That's the kind of entrepreneurial thinking we need here. Thornfield used to be a place where innovation happened, where people built things that mattered. We've lost that, and we need someone who remembers what it means to build something real. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video." I felt something shift in my chest. Perfect. They were offering me the opportunity to save the company that had fired my father, to succeed where he had failed, to prove my worth in the most tangible way possible. But more than that, they were offering me the chance to do something meaningful, to save jobs, to turn around a struggling company, to use everything I'd learned and built over the past decade for a purpose larger than just profit. We'll take the contract, I said, but I have conditions. Total operational authority. When I identify problems, you implement solutions. No bureaucratic delays or political maneuvering. If this is going to work, you need to trust my team's expertise and act on our recommendations quickly. Half the fee up front, half upon successful completion of specified benchmarks. And complete transparency. I need access to everything. All records, all departments, all problems, no matter how embarrassing or politically sensitive. Patricia didn't hesitate. Done. When can you start? Monday. The next 6 months were the hardest I'd ever worked in my life. Craig and I moved into temporary housing near Thornfield, and we basically lived at that company. We audited every department, analyzed every process, interviewed every level of employee, from janitors to senior managers. What we found was a company that had been slowly suffocating under layers of inefficiencies, outdated thinking, and leadership that had prioritized short-term profits over long-term sustainability. Prod. The technology infrastructure was a disaster. Systems that should have been updated a decade ago. Incompatible software platforms that couldn't communicate with each other. Redundant processes that wasted countless hours. The equipment on the manufacturing floor was outdated and frequently breaking down. But nobody had invested in preventive maintenance or upgrades because it wasn't in that quarter's budget. The company was losing money by trying to save money, trapped in a death spiral of short-sighted cost-cutting that actually increased costs. We implemented a complete overhaul, new integrated software systems that streamlined operations, a preventive maintenance program for equipment, cross-training for employees to increase flexibility, energy efficiency upgrades that reduced utility costs by 30%. Cruelly, we eliminated redundant management positions. Not to be cruel, but because there were literally 3 people doing the work that one person could do efficiently. We renegotiated contracts with suppliers, finding better quality materials at lower costs because nobody had bothered to review these relationships in years. Every change we made faced resistance. People don't like change, especially in struggling companies where everyone is scared and defensive. But Patricia backed us completely, and slowly we started seeing results. Production efficiency increased. Defect rates decreased. Employee morale improved as people realized they were working for a company that might actually survive. Orders started coming in from clients who'd left years ago, attracted by improved quality and reliability. By month 9, Thornfield was profitable for the first time in 4 years. By month 11, they'd paid off their most pressing debts and were actively planning expansion. By the time our contract was approaching completion, the company was genuinely stable, poised for growth, and the board was talking about long-term strategic planning instead of just survival. The success caught media attention. Local business journals ran stories about Thornfield's turnaround. We got interview requests, speaking invitations. Restotech's reputation exploded. We had more clients than we could handle, larger companies seeking our services, venture capital firms interested in funding our expansion, and that's when I got the call I'd been simultaneously expecting and dreading. My brother, Marcus. I was in my temporary office at Thornfield late afternoon, reviewing final reports before heading home to Sarah and Emma for the weekend. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway during a major project. Everything is potentially important. John, his voice, that familiar tone of superiority mixed with something I couldn't quite identify. Uncertainty, maybe. It's Marcus. We need to talk. I felt surprisingly calm. No racing heart, no anger, just curiosity. About what? About what you're doing at Thornfield. About Dad? About the family. There is no about the family, Marcus. Great. You all made that clear 8 years ago. I was erased, remember? Cropped out of the pictures, the mistake you had to live with. What exactly is there to talk about? There was a long pause, and I could almost see him struggling with whatever he'd called to say. Marcus wasn't used to being in the position of supplicant. He was used to being the golden child, the one who got what he wanted, the one who never had to ask, "Don't forget to subscribe. Hit that like button and comment on this video. Dad's been following what you've done at Thornfield," he finally said. "Everyone has. The turnaround, the success, the media coverage. Mom saw an article in the Business Journal. They recognized your name, realized you were the son that we'd lost touch with." "Lost touch with," I repeated flatly. That's an interesting way to describe systematically erasing someone from your family and blaming them for problems they didn't cause. But sure, we'll call it lost touch. "John, look, I know things weren't great between us when we were younger, but you're successful now. You've proven yourself. Maybe we can move past all that. The family wants to reconnect, to be part of your life again. Mom and Dad want to meet Sarah and Emma. I'd like my daughter to know her uncle." The audacity of it was almost breathtaking. Come. No apology, no acknowledgement of the real damage they'd done. Just a breezy assumption that now that I was successful, now that I'd proven I wasn't the failure they'd labeled me, we could all just pretend the last 8 years hadn't happened. Now that I had something they could benefit from: professional success, social status, connections, suddenly I was worth reclaiming. "Tell me something, Marcus," I said quietly. "Quan, if Thornfield had gone bankrupt, if my company had failed, if I was still that disappointing son barely scraping by, would you be making this call?" Silence. "That's what I thought. You don't want me in your life. You want access to my success. You want to be able to tell your friends that your brother is the guy who saved Thornfield Industries. You want Mom and Dad to have a successful son they can talk about at parties, now that their golden child's career in finance is apparently not quite golden enough to make up for Dad's professional failures. That's not fair." His voice had an edge now, defensive anger replacing the calculated friendliness. "We're family. Family forgives. Family moves forward. Family," I repeated. "You mean like when Mom told me I was just a mistake you all had to live with? Like when Dad blamed me for getting fired because it was easier than accepting his own professional failures? Like when you all literally erased me from photographs? That kind of family. We were hurting. John, Dad losing his job was traumatic for everyone. People say things they don't mean when they're in pain. 8 years, Marcus, 8 years of complete silence. Not one birthday call, not one attempt at reconciliation until the moment you realized I'd become someone useful. That's not trauma. That's not pain-driven mistakes. That's deliberate rejection. And now that it's no longer convenient, you want to pretend it didn't happen." I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, and I realized something surprising. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel the old hurt, the old desperation for their approval. I just felt tired of their bullshit and very, very clear about what I needed to say. "Here's what's going to happen, Marcus. Come. I'm going to finish my contract at Thornfield, return to my actual life with my actual family who loved me when I had nothing. I'm going to keep building Restotech, keep being a good husband and father, keep living the life I created without any of you. You all can keep playing your games, maintaining your appearances, pretending that your rejection of me was somehow my fault. But I'm done carrying that weight. I'm done being your scapegoat or your trophy, depending on what's convenient for you at the moment. You're being unreasonable. Mom and Dad made mistakes, but they're your parents. Don't you think they deserve a second chance? I felt something flare in my chest. Not quite anger, but close. Let me tell you what I think people deserve. Marcus, I think people deserve basic respect. I think children deserve to be loved unconditionally, not just when they meet arbitrary standards. I think scapegoats deserve apologies, not demands that they get over it and move on because now their success is useful to the people who rejected them. You want to talk about what people deserve? I deserved a family that saw my worth even when I was struggling. I deserved parents who investigated why I was struggling in school instead of just labeling me stupid. I deserved a brother who had my back instead of joining the pylon. I deserved the benefit of the doubt when Dad got fired instead of being blamed for someone else's professional failures. So that's it. You're just cutting us off forever. Being vindictive? I'm not being vindictive, Marcus. I'm being protective. I have a daughter now who I'm raising to know her worth, to understand that her value isn't conditional on her achievements. I have a wife who loved me when I was nobody special. I have friends and colleagues who've seen me at my worst and stuck around. I have a life that works, and I'm not letting you all back in just so you can disrupt it when I inevitably disappoint you again. Because here's the thing, I will disappoint you eventually. My company might struggle, or I might make a bad decision, or I might not live up to whatever new expectations you've decided to impose. And when that happens, you'll do exactly what you did before.
No!
You'll blame me, reject me, erase me, because that's who you are. That's the pattern. I'm just choosing not to participate anymore. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed. Less friendly, more cold. You're making a mistake. Family is important. John, you might not appreciate what we're offering now, but someday you'll regret burning these bridges. I didn't burn the bridges. Marcus, you all burned them 8 years ago when Mom told me I was never really part of the family. I'm just declining to rebuild them on your timeline for your convenience. There's a difference. Fine, we tried. When you're alone and realize what you've given up, don't come crawling back expecting forgiveness. The irony of that statement was so perfect, I almost laughed. Goodbye, Marcus. Give my regards to the family you're so proud of. Crong up before he could respond, and I sat there in my office at Thornfield, the company that had once been central to my family's mythology, the place where I'd just proven every single one of their assumptions about me wrong. I thought I'd feel triumphant. I thought I'd feel vindicated. Instead, I just felt sad. Sad for the family we could have been, sad for the childhood I should have had, sad for the relationship with my brother that never existed outside of hierarchy and competition. But underneath the sadness was something solid and unmovable certainty. Certainty that I'd made the right choice, that I'd protected myself and my family from people who'd proven they couldn't be trusted with our well-being. That weekend, I flew home to Sarah and Emma. We had dinner together, played board games, took a walk in the park. Emma told me about a project at school where she'd struggled with the initial concept, but found a creative solution that her teacher loved. Kara talked about a challenging work situation she'd navigated successfully. We were just a normal family, supporting each other, celebrating small victories, weathering small struggles. It wasn't dramatic or remarkable, but it was real and it was ours. The following month, we completed the Thornfield contract. The company was stable, profitable, positioned for growth. Patricia Henderson wrote us a recommendation that basically guaranteed we could work with any client we wanted. The board gave us a bonus beyond our contract, and several board members left to start their own ventures and immediately hired us as consultants. But the real victory wasn't the money or the professional success. It was walking through that company, seeing the employees whose jobs we'd saved, knowing that we'd taken something broken and made it functional again. It was proving, primarily to myself, that the labels my family had put on me were lies. I wasn't dumb. I wasn't a failure. I wasn't a disappointment. I was someone who learned differently, who had skills that didn't fit into traditional academic boxes, who'd built something meaningful through persistence and creativity and hard work. About 3 months after Marcus's call, I was at a business conference when I ran into someone I vaguely recognized from childhood, neighbor from the old street where we grew up. Cool. She recognized me first, actually came up with an enthusiastic greeting and congratulations on the Thornfield success. "Your family must be so proud," she said, smiling warmly. "I wouldn't know," I replied honestly. "We're not in contact." Her smile faltered, confusion replacing enthusiasm. "Really? But your parents talk about you all the time now? How you saved Thornfield Industries? How successful your company is, how proud they are of everything you've accomplished." Chunked. "Your mother was just saying at the last charity gala how she always knew you had it in you. how she'd always encouraged your entrepreneurial spirit. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Of course they were doing this. They couldn't reach me directly, couldn't benefit from my success personally. So they were doing the next best thing, writing history, claiming credit, basking in reflected glory. That's interesting, I said carefully, because the last conversation I had with my mother 8 years ago, she told me I was just a mistake they had to live with, and that my brother Marcus was their real son. They removed me from family photos. So if they're telling people they're proud of me now, it's news to me. The woman's face went through several expressions: shock, embarrassment, confusion, and finally, something that looked like understanding. I'm so sorry, I had no idea. Kut! The way they talk, you'd think you were all close. They talk that way because my success is useful to them now. It improves their social standing to have a successful son, even if that son wants nothing to do with them. It's all about appearances with them. It always has been. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. Tacked a bit more, and she shared other things she'd heard, how my father told people he'd always encouraged my hands-on learning style, how my mother claimed she'd supported my decision to go to state school, how they positioned themselves as the proud parents of a self-made success story. It was all lies, complete fabrications, but it was also completely predictable. Couldn't accept responsibility for how they treated me. Couldn't acknowledge their mistakes, so they simply rewrote the narrative. I could have been angry. I could have gone public, set the record straight, exposed their lies. But what would that accomplish? It would just give them more attention, create drama that would inevitably suck me back into their orbit. Instead, I did something more effective. I stopped caring what they told people. Their lies weren't my problem. The people who mattered, the people in my actual life, knew the truth. Sarah knew what I'd been through and loved me anyway. Emma was growing up knowing she was unconditionally loved and supported. My friends and colleagues had seen me build Restotech from nothing, had witnessed my work ethic and integrity firsthand. What my parents told their country club friends or charity gala attendees had exactly zero impact on my actual life. That realization was freeing in a way I hadn't expected. Priding for so long, even after cutting contact, they'd occupied space in my head. I'd wondered what they thought, whether they ever regretted their treatment of me, whether they ever acknowledged that I'd succeeded despite their predictions. But after that conversation, I realized their thoughts and acknowledgments were irrelevant. They existed in their world of social appearances and manufactured narratives. And I existed in my world of actual relationships and genuine achievement. Those worlds didn't need to intersect. Restotech continued to grow. We opened offices in 6 more cities, expanded our services, hired incredible people who shared our values. We developed a reputation not just for technical expertise, but for ethical business practices and genuine care for our clients' success. Craig and I implemented a profit-sharing program for employees, created scholarships for kids from non-traditional backgrounds who wanted to study business, and made sure our company culture valued different types of intelligence and learning styles. I thought about my younger self a lot during those years. The kid who believed he was stupid because that's what his family told him. The teenager who stayed up late trying to force himself into a mold that didn't fit. Kind of the young man who'd been blamed for his father's professional failures and erased from family photos. I wished I could go back and tell him what I knew now that their judgment was wrong, that his worth wasn't determined by their standards, that the struggle would lead somewhere meaningful. But since I couldn't do that, I did the next best thing. AI made sure Emma knew every single day that she was smart in her own way, that her unique perspective and approach to problems was valuable, that our love for her had nothing to do with her grades or achievements. When she struggled with math but excelled at creative writing, we celebrated the writing and got her a tutor for math without making her feel defective. When she wanted to quit piano because she wasn't naturally talented but loved soccer, we supported the switch without guilt or comparison to other kids. We raised her to know that success comes in many forms, that struggle doesn't entar Novamentican Juan failure, and that her worth as a person was inherent, not earned. When Emma was 10, she asked me about my parents. Kids are perceptive, and she'd noticed that while we regularly visited Sarah's parents, my side of the family was never mentioned. We were sitting in the backyard one evening watching fireflies, and she just asked directly, the way kids do, "Dad, how come we never see your mom and dad? Did they die?" I could have lied. I could have made something up to protect her from the complicated truth. But Sarah and I had always committed to being honest with Emma. Age appropriately, but honest. No, they're alive, but we're not in contact with them. Sometimes families don't get along, and sometimes the healthiest choice is to have distance. Did you have a fight? Something like that. When I was younger, they treated me in ways that hurt me a lot. They made me feel like I wasn't good enough, like I was a disappointment. And even after I grew up and built a good life, they didn't apologize or change. So I decided it was better for me and for our family to not have them in our lives. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing. That makes me sad, but I get it. My friend Jessica's dad is mean to her sometimes, and her mom is getting divorced from him to protect her. Sometimes you have to protect yourself from people, even if they're family. The wisdom of children never ceases to amaze me. Exactly right, sweetheart. Family should make you feel safe and loved. If they don't, it's okay to choose people who do. I'm glad you chose us, she said simply, leaning against my shoulder. Me too, kiddo, me too. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. Years passed. Restotech became one of the most respected business efficiency consulting firms in the region, then in the country. We were featured in business magazines, invited to speak at conferences, courted by companies wanting to partner or acquire us. Craig and I had offers we could have accepted that would have made us both extremely wealthy, but we'd built something we believed in and we weren't ready to sell. I turned 40, then 42, then 43. Emma was in middle school, showing signs of inheriting both my problem-solving abilities and Sarah's analytical mind. She was talking about maybe studying engineering, maybe business, maybe something we hadn't even thought of yet. She had time to figure it out, and we'd support whatever she chose. I hadn't heard from Marcus or my parents in over a decade. Occasionally, I'd hear through the grapevine about their lives. Marcus's career in finance had plateaued. Respectable, but not spectacular. My father was fully retired, struggling with health issues. My mother was still active in her social circles, still curating that perfect image. Coring. They were living their lives, and I was living mine. And those lives existed in completely separate orbits. Then came the email that would change everything one final time. It was from Patricia Henderson, the CEO who'd hired us for the Thornfield turnaround all those years ago. She'd moved on to other ventures since then, but we'd stayed in touch professionally and personally. She'd become something of a mentor and friend, someone who'd seen me at my most focused and driven during that intense year of work. The email was brief. "John, I have something I need to discuss with you. It's sensitive and potentially complicated, but I think it's an opportunity you'll want to hear about. Can we meet for coffee this week?" We met at a quiet cafe near my office. Patricia looked good, energized in a way I hadn't seen when she was managing Thornfield's crisis. Plate. She'd started her own consulting firm, smaller and more specialized than Restotech, focused on C-suite transitions and leadership development. "I'm going to be direct," she said, after we'd ordered coffee. "The Thornfield board wants to offer you the CEO position. The current CEO is retiring, and they want someone who understands the company deeply, someone who's proven they can turn things around and build sustainable success. They want you." I stared at her, genuinely speechless. Quotient CEO of Thornfield Industries, the company that had fired my father, the company whose name had been spoken with such reverence in my childhood home, the company I'd saved from bankruptcy and then walked away from. "Patricia, I run my own company. Restotech is my life's work. Why would I leave that to run Thornfield? Because it's a different challenge. You've proven you can build something from nothing. This would be proving you can lead an established institution, shape its culture, guide its long-term strategy. Plus, the board is offering a compensation package that would make you very comfortable. Stock options that could be worth millions if you continue the company's growth trajectory. And honestly, John, I think you'd be brilliant at it. You have the technical expertise, the business acumen, and something even more important, you genuinely care about the people. Co-save that company not just by fixing systems, but by respecting the humans working within those systems. I need to think about this. Talk to Sarah. Talk to Craig. Really consider what it would mean. Of course, take your time. But John, there's one more thing you should know. She paused, looking uncomfortable. Your father applied for a senior advisory position at Thornfield a few months ago. But the board rejected him, partly because they didn't think he was the right fit, but also because they're aware of his history there and aware that you were the one who actually saved the company. If you take this position, you'll be CEO of the company that fired him and rejected his attempt to return. I'm not saying that should influence your decision either way, but I thought you should know. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. I went home that night and told Sarah everything. We stayed up late, talking through the implications, the opportunities, the complications. Emma had already gone to bed, so it was just us, coffee, and quiet conversation about the kind of life-changing decision that doesn't come along often. What do you want to do? Sarah asked, getting to the heart of it. Not what you think you should do, not what would prove something to someone, but what do you actually want? I thought about it, really thought about it. Part of me wants to turn it down immediately because I don't want anything to do with my family's history, don't want to be anywhere near that drama. But another part of me thinks this could be meaningful. Thornfield employs over 300 people now. It's a real company doing real work, and I could shape its future in ways that matter. I could implement all the ideas I've had about ethical business practices, employee development, sustainable growth, and honestly, there's a part of me that would feel satisfaction in becoming CEO of the company that rejected my father. Not because I want revenge, but because it would be proof, undeniable proof, that their assessment of me was completely wrong. Then, I think you have your answer, Sarah said gently. Take the job. Not because of your father, but despite him. Take it because it's a genuine opportunity to do meaningful work at a larger scale. And if it happens to also demonstrate your success in the most tangible way possible, well, that's just a bonus. Over the next few weeks, I had extensive discussions with the Thornfield board, negotiated the terms of my employment, and worked out a transition plan with Craig for Restotech. Craig would become CEO of Restotech, something he'd earned and was ready for. I'd maintain a board position and advisory role, but the day-to-day operations would be his. It felt right, a natural evolution for both of us. The announcement that I was becoming CEO of Thornfield Industries made regional business news. It was a compelling story. The consultant who'd saved the company from bankruptcy was returning to lead it into its next chapter. Articles mentioned my background, Restotech's success, the unusual path I'd taken from state school to business success. I knew my family would see the news. I knew they'd have reactions, opinions, probably another attempt at reconnection. I was right. This time, it wasn't Marcus who reached out. It was my father himself. An email, formal and stilted, with the subject line, "Congratulations and Reconciliation." John, I saw the announcement about your appointment at Thornfield. This is truly remarkable, and I wanted to reach out personally to congratulate you. Comment. I know we've had our differences over the years, and I take responsibility for my part in our estrangement. I was dealing with professional disappointment and personal struggles, and I didn't handle things well. But I've always believed in you, even when I didn't express it properly. I'd like the opportunity to talk, to rebuild our relationship. You're going to need guidance as you take on this CEO role, and I have decades of experience with Thornfield that could be valuable to you. Perhaps we could meet for lunch. Your father, Richard, I read it 3 times, analyzing every word choice, every implication. The apology was vague, non-specific, more about his struggles than my pain. The offer of guidance was presumptuous, assuming I needed his help, positioning himself as the expert despite the fact that I'd succeeded where he'd failed. Dugnature, your father. Richard was particularly telling, as if I might have forgotten who he was, as if the title father required reminder and affirmation. I drafted several responses, ranging from detailed explanations of why reconciliation wasn't possible to angry lists of everything he'd done wrong to simple one-word refusals. In the end, I settled on something brief and honest. Richard, thank you for the congratulations. I don't need guidance for the Thornfield position. Eve already successfully turned the company around once, and I'm confident in my ability to lead it going forward. As for rebuilding our relationship, I'm not interested. You and Mom made your assessment of my worth very clear years ago, and the fact that you want to reconnect now that I'm successful only confirms that your interest is in my status, not in me as a person. I wish you well, but I've built a good life without you, and I intend to keep it that way. John, I sent it before I could second-guess myself, and I felt a sense of finality. No room for misinterpretation, no opening for negotiation, just clear boundaries firmly stated. My father's response came within an hour. Ely, it was angry, defensive, accusing me of being ungrateful and vindictive, claiming I was punishing him for mistakes made during a difficult time, insisting that real men forgive and move forward. I read it once and then deleted it without responding. His anger wasn't my problem. His inability to take genuine responsibility wasn't my burden to carry. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. I started my role as CEO of Thornfield Industries on a Monday in September, just after Emma started 8th grade. The first day felt surreal, sitting in the office that overlooked the same manufacturing floor where my father had once walked, making decisions that would affect the company that had been such a significant part of my family's mythology. But I quickly moved past the symbolism and into the actual work. I spent the first month just listening, meeting with employees at every level, understanding the current challenges, identifying opportunities for growth. I discovered that while the company was stable, it had lost some of its innovative edge, become too comfortable with maintaining the status quo. We needed to push forward, not just survive, but thrive. I implemented several initiatives that first year, established an innovation fund where any employee could submit ideas for new products or process improvements and receive funding to develop them. We created apprenticeship programs partnering with local technical schools, bringing in young people who learned differently, who thrived in hands-on environments. We developed a radical transparency policy where financial information and strategic decisions were shared with all employees, not just executives. Because people do better work when they understand how their efforts contribute to the bigger picture. Some of the old guard pushed back, executives who'd been there during my father's time, who thought a CEO should be distant and authoritative, who believed transparency was risky and employee empowerment was naive.